Well, everybody, welcome to our class today. We are so excited to be resuming after a month's break for Christmas. So, welcome back. Today, we are starting with our Helper series. That's a series that is geared towards anybody who helps others with family history. So, you may have a calling in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, such as a consultant or a member of a relief society or elders quorum presidency, whatever that may be. Or you just may be the family expert, the person that people come to in your family because they know that you've got the skills and can help them make progress. So today, our first class in the series is Teaching Skills for Helpers. Next week, already, we're having another break, if you can believe it. So no class next week because of the Martin Luther King holiday in the U.S. We'll pick up with the second class in the Helper series on January 25th, which is about doing a discovery experience, and we'll actually have a demo of that. And then we'll have our last helper class on February 1st, which is moving family history forward in the Warden Stake, and that is particularly geared towards people with callings in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So we hope to see you back and also spread the word to anybody that you think might be interested. We invite you, as always, to look for key takeaways from class today, just something that you feel will help you going forward or that will help you help others. And at the end of class, we'll invite you to put those in the chat so that everybody can learn from your key takeaways. So here's what we've got on the schedule for today. First of all, we'll talk briefly about our main purpose as family history helpers. After that, we're going to go over some tips for preparing to teach during a discovery experience, tips for teaching. So the first one is preparing, the second one is actually teaching, and then the last thing, we'll talk about how we can have ongoing improvement of our teaching. So you'll notice today in class that we're actually going to focus quite a bit on preparation. The reason for that is I've noticed if you prepare for your teaching, for helping other people, the other things typically fall into place. It's kind of interesting how that works. A lot of the effort is actually done before you ever meet with the person that you're helping. So, what is our main purpose as family history helpers? Well, when we help others with family history, honestly, we are teachers. That really boils it down to what we're doing. We don't just do their family history while they're watching because that's not a great learning experience for them. We don't just tell them what to click with no information or context because that also doesn't provide a very good learning experience for them. But instead, our goal as family history helpers is to provide experiences that help them learn to love and to do family history. I love this quote by Robert D. Hales. Some of you probably remember him. He passed away a while ago. With this quote that I'm sharing here, was not given for family history. It was actually given for gospel teachers, such as Sunday school teachers or so forth. But this is what he said, and I think it applies to us as we teach family history. He says we should not worry that we are not professionally trained gospel teachers or family history teachers. No training, class, or manual is as helpful as personally studying our scriptures, and then here I would insert for family history, doing our own family history, praying, pondering, and seeking the guidance of the Holy Spirit. That really is what helps us be effective teachers in any situation and especially in family history. So, about helping, as a helper, you know what? We don't have to be perfect. I know sometimes people, especially when we're starting out, I remember when I was first called as a consultant, I was clueless. Like I knew nothing. And I was a little intimidated. I was afraid that I was going to mess things up or not be able to serve the people that I was called to serve. But I came to realize over the years, you know what? We do not have to be perfect. In fact, we don't even have to be an expert. We don't have to know everything. And just to comment a little bit about that by way of sharing, the Lord's tender mercies. When I was first called as a consultant in California, in my ward in California, about 20 years ago, it was about 2005. And like I said, I was feeling these feelings of insecurity and not knowing what I was doing. What I found was that the people in my ward who needed help, the Lord would lead me to people that were about at my level so that I was able to help them. Now, sometimes they were a little beyond and I had to get help, but it was just too much of a coincidence to me that so many of the people that I needed to help were at my level. I felt like that was really a tender mercy of the Lord. And then as I built my skills and became more capable and confident, I noticed he gave me harder problems with people to help. So if you're feeling, I don't know how many of you are new Temple and Family History consultants on this call or listening, but just be aware that the Lord knows your capabilities and your concerns. And it's been my experience that he'll guide you to the people that you can help and also give you opportunities to build your skills. It's really quite amazing. So you can be more effective as a helper if you admit it when you don't know something. Like you, I've had the very interesting experience of sitting in a meeting or whatever where you can tell the person gets asked a question and you can kind of tell that they're just bluffing or kind of making it up as they go along. I also see this a lot in our online group. Some of you are in our Facebook Temple and Family History group. I mean, our meaning all consultants. Anybody that's a consultant or has been a consultant can join, and it's a really great group. But what's interesting is sometimes somebody will ask a question and people will chime in with wrong answers and they I just don't know where they get the information from, but I think sometimes people want to guess or come off as an expert. It's honestly so much better to admit it if you don't know. There's no shame in that. And I think honestly, people respect that. If you just say, hey, I'm sorry I don't know, but I'd be glad to try and find out. So we can admit it when we don't know something. And it's important to know how to get the answers. So, just for example, the Family Search Wiki is a wonderful place to get answers. We can ask other consultants, we can ask our priesthood leaders, we can ask in online groups, but again, be careful. In online groups, I always trust people's answers more if they give a backup source, like they give a help center article or an official website of the church that documents that their answer is correct. So knowing how to find answers is very good for a helper. And then, of course, we want to always keep learning and improving our skills. So for today's class, three terms to know. Discovery experience. This was actually first introduced at Roots Tech. Gosh, it's probably been about 8 or 10 years now. But a discovery experience is defined as a personalized, hands-on experience that is prayerfully prepared by a helper ahead of time, whether a consultant or someone else. But the purpose of this experience is very simply to help people discover something about their family, hence the name Discovery Experience. Helper Resources is a website provided by Family Search that gives you tools for helping others, and we'll be looking at that later on. And then plans, there is a section on the Helper Resources site where you can actually record your plan for a discovery experience. And it has some unique features. You know, you can do it in Google Docs or a word processing document or whatever. But the plan section of the Helper Resources site has some unique features that help you prepare a little bit better to help somebody. So let's talk a minute, just very briefly, about the responsibilities that are specific to consultants. So the General Handbook, Section 25, is all about temple and family history work. I would strongly recommend reading that regularly just because it's so good. It's got so much good information in it, and it was recently updated. So look through that and you'll notice some positive changes, such as the primary leaders now being invited to the Temple and Family History Coordination meeting. This link actually will take you to section 25. And that reminds me to say at the end of this class, we will give you a link to this slide deck so that you can come to this slide and just click on the link if you need to or would like to. The summary of our responsibility as consultants, and this applies to Ward and Stake, Temple and Family History consultants, our main goal is to help members experience the blessing of discovering their ancestors. And I put in cousins, that's why it's in square brackets, but that's because the church promotes descendancy research as well as ancestral research. So we want to discover our ancestors and our cousins or help others discover them and perform temple ordinances on their behalf. And then there is also a little known resource. I'm surprised at how many people don't know about this. And I think it's just because maybe it hasn't been publicized that much. But this is a wonderful page with resources for people who have temple and family history callings. So here's a link to it, to the Ward Temple and Family History Consultant page. But you can navigate to different callings by going to Gospel Library, Handbooks and Callings, either Ward or Stake Callings, depending on what's applicable to you, and then Temple and Family History. They've got videos, they've got past training meetings, just wonderful resources. So, especially if you're starting out, you would want to look at this. But even if you've been a consultant for a long time, I would recommend this because it seems like there is always something to learn. So, by way of kind of summary or to pull all this together, our main purpose as family history helpers is to provide a discovery experience that does the following. First and foremost, we want them to feel the Spirit. We want them to feel the Holy Ghost blessing them. If this is a non-member situation, by that I mean non-members of the Church of Jesus Christ, of course other Christians will relate to feeling the Spirit, but what if you're helping someone who's not a Christian or not a practicing Christian? Well, still, I think we can all feel that spirit of family. We can all feel that connection to our ancestors. So I think the point here is we want to make it a beautiful, positive, even spiritual experience for the people that we're helping. We want to help them discover and connect with their family, both deceased and living. We want them to experience success and gain confidence, especially if they're starting out. And what I notice in, at least in my own stake, most of the people that I help with family history are beginners because they're the people that need help. Kind of seems obvious, right? But it's actually kind of rare for me to have someone with more experience request help. It does happen once in a while. Someone's stuck on a particularly challenging problem or they're getting results that they're not expecting when they use FamilySearch.org. But most of the time, we're trying to help beginners really learn to love family history. And that involves being successful. It does not build confidence to fail at trying to do family history, add family names to the tree. So experiencing success and helping them gain confidence is a major purpose of what we do as family history helpers. And then finally, we want them to be motivated to keep doing family history. We don't just want a flash in the pan, one-time effort, but we want this to be a lifelong adventure for them, something that they will love throughout their lives. So, how do we achieve this purpose? Let's talk about preparing to teach during a discovery experience. That's really the first step to fulfilling our purpose. I've noticed that preparation is really the key to having the spirit in a discovery experience. Once in a while, you might get caught off guard. For instance, somebody catches you in the hall at church and they say, I've got this quick question and can you help me here? So sometimes you may not have the chance to prepare extensively, but most of the time you will. And my experience has been, personally at least, if I had the chance to prepare but didn't, then I feel less confident that I can have the Spirit with me. Preparation really does seem to open up the windows of heaven and revelation that we need to be effective in helping other people. So there are two types of preparation that we can do as helpers. One is general, as you might expect, and that includes broad preparation, such as learning about family history, building our skills, learning how to use the website. It's not necessarily as obvious as it might seem. After all, it is technology, and Family Search, I think they've done their best to make it user friendly. But I do find a lot of times people jump to conclusions about how it works, and it isn't really how it works. So we can be prepared by really understanding how the website works. We prepare by doing our own family history. We prepare by being humble and prayerful and by seeking and following the Spirit. So that's general preparation. And then, of course, specific preparation involves those preparations that we make to help a particular person with a particular discovery experience. When we do specific preparation, there are two ways that I've noticed that people will approach helping another person. One is what we could call a random approach, where no real preparation is done, and we just kind of show up to help the person and just kind of click around on the website and poke here, poke there. And it's kind of like I liken that to throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks. And maybe it sticks and maybe it doesn't. And yes, there's a chance that you could have a good discovery experience. But honestly, I think the odds are against us when compared to purposeful preparation, which is providing a meaningful experience that meets the person's goals and experiences long-term involvement. So it's intentional. We didn't just leave it to chance. We're actually doing something that we feel will be meaningful and helpful to that person. When we prepare as helpers, we also can assist with one of the most challenging aspects of family history, especially for beginners, and that is just simply figuring out where on earth to start. So, especially for people with full trees, if they've had pioneer ancestry and so forth, or if they have a family genealogist who's done generations and generations, finding a place to work can be pretty difficult, actually. The places are there. I've never met somebody that couldn't find a place to start on their tree, but it can be a lot harder if you have a full tree. Well, we as helpers can help people find those elusive spots where they can contribute. So, in preparing to help someone, the most important thing in my mind is to seek and follow the Spirit. I don't think there's anything other than that that would help us be more successful. All the learning in the world, all the other preparation, without the Spirit, we're going to be less effective. So always, this is the overarching thing that we need to do is to seek and follow those promptings from the Spirit. And once we've done that, when we realize that's our overarching objective, that that's always what we're going to do at every step of the process, there's basically three steps that we want to follow to prepare to help somebody. First of all, we need to learn their goals. And this may seem a little surprising. I remember for many years, back in the olden days, before even Family Search, it was assumed that we would just teach people research skills. And so we didn't ask them their goals. I don't think that was ever anything that people paid attention to. They just said, well, you're going to have to learn how to read census records, and you're going to have to learn how to enter information into the software, or back in the old days into a family group sheet, or whatever it may be. I don't remember us ever being told to ask people their goals. That began to be taught, if I remember right, with Roots Tech, with teaching about discovery experiences. And they said, hey, if you're going to help somebody discover something about their family, you kind of need to know what they would like to do. Like, are they wanting to add photos and stories? Are they wanting to do research? Are they wanting some other thing to do with their family? So we really, before we can help someone effectively, we've got to know what's important to them. Then, once we know those goals, we prepare the discovery experience to meet those goals. And after we've figured out a good discovery experience, then we write down our teaching plan. And we're going to actually go through these and see an example of each one. So, learning the person's goal, once I started doing this, asking people their goal, I discovered that I mainly got three different responses. So I'll tell you what the responses were, and also what how I kind of responded to each one. So the first one is that the person has a doable goal, a reasonable goal that's going to be pretty easy to meet. For instance, find names for temple work. So if they know the goal, and it's an appropriate goal, it's not going to be too hard, then we're ready to move to the next step of preparing the discovery experience. But I have also noticed that especially beginners may have a goal, but it may not be a good goal for them to start with. One of the most common goals for a beginner is that they want to break through a difficult brick wall. Now, you don't ever want to discourage people, right? And say, oh, you can't do that. What are you thinking? We would never want to respond in that way. But on the other hand, it can be very discouraging for a beginner to dive in, and it would be like sending a high school student to a doctoral program and saying, okay, write your doctoral thesis. It's just not a good thing to do. So, what I've done in cases like that, where people want to break through the brick wall that nobody else in their family has broken through yet, and sometimes, actually, often, that's what's kept them away from family history because they're intimidated by that challenge. What I'll do is sometimes I'll ask them if I could look at the brick wall, and sometimes more records have become available and it's no longer a brick wall. And if that's the case, then you say, yep, let's attack that goal. But if you look at it, like examples are finding adoptive parents for closed adoptions back in the late 1800s, where it's almost impossible to get those records, then that is probably not the right thing to start a beginner on. So what I'll say is that is a fantastic goal, and I think we should keep that in mind. But for now, why don't we start on something simpler, and then we'll build the skills to tackle that difficult goal later on. And you know what? I have never had somebody be disappointed when I've suggested that. On the contrary, they seem relieved. They're like, "Oh, I could do something simpler? Really? There's simpler options?" So you can suggest a simpler goal, like let's do some descendancy research and find some names for that baptismal trip that your youth are going on next month or whatever. So just tactfully suggest a simpler goal, with the understanding that we can tackle the more difficult one later on if they would still like to. And then the last response that I've gotten is the person just doesn't have a goal. Sometimes they're so new to family history, they're not even sure what type of goal they could set, or they're not even sure how to choose one. So, in that case, I found that especially if you're working with members of the Church of Jesus Christ, almost always they're going to be interested in names for the temple. So, you can suggest a goal or two, such as finding temple names, or you can ask if they would like to think and pray about a goal. I remember one sister I helped in my stake and draper felt prompted that she should write her husband's family history. He had just died. And so she felt a very strong prompting to do that. So we worked a little bit together on that. She did most of it. I just answered maybe a few questions. And then she ended up giving that as a gift to her other family members, the finished history of her husband. What a beautiful, meaningful gift, right? So that it was an example of her being prompted of praying what goals she should have and then being prompted to do that specific goal. So we learn the person's goal by whatever means is appropriate. And then depending on the goal, we might need to get more information. For example, you might need to get their contact information if you're going to use helper resources, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. We might need to get the names and the PIDs, the ID numbers of people in family tree to work on, or any other information that is relevant to that person's goal. The next step after we've done that introductory finding out what the goal is we actually prepare the discovery experience to meet that goal, to help the person meet the goal. Once again, so important to seek and follow the guidance of the Spirit, because as one of our sacrament meeting speakers said today, we don't know other people's hearts and minds, but the Lord does. So they may have expressed a goal to us, and we have a good idea of what it is, but there may be some other things the Lord is aware of that we're not. And by seeking and following the guidance of the Spirit, we can make that experience even more effective for that person in meeting their goal. If applicable, you can review the person's tree using helper resources. And at this point, let's just do a quick introduction to helper resources, which, as you may recall from the beginning, that's the website run by Family Search. It's on the Family Search website that gives you tools to help the people that you're helping. So the way you get to helper resources is go to pretty much any page on familysearch.org and click this question mark up at the top. When you do that, you get this drop down, and one of the options here is helper resources. So just click that and you'll go to helper resources. Or if you're a URL kind of person, which I am, you can just go to familysearch.org/help/helper and it will take you to the same place. When you get in, you're going to see something like this. So when you first start helping a person, what you need to do is invite them or add them to the planner. And all that means is that you will have permission to see their tree as they see it. So you'll be able to open up their fan chart. They'll be at the center of it. You'll see all their ancestors and relatives. And that's very helpful if the person wanted you to help them extend their lines or do descendancy research. So what you do in this case to add someone to your planner is click add someone. And when you do that, you just get a little pop-up with different ways that you can add them through email or through text. I'll tell you, honestly, lately I use text most of the time. It's just so easy. So you just like click a link on the little pop-up. You get a link that you can text. And so you text that link to the person or you email the link to the person. And what it does, it takes them to a page where they have to grant you permission to see their information. So Family Search is very respectful of their privacy and confidentiality. So if they're comfortable with it, they click, yes, I agree for so and so to see my information. And then you get a notification from Family Search telling you that the person has granted you permission. And when they do, they show up here in the list of added or accepted people, like my friend and my fake friend. This is an example here. My fake friend Andrea is showing up here as somebody that I have added. So then, supposing I need to prepare a discovery experience for Andrea, how do I do that? Well, I can start by clicking on her name. And when I do that, I get taken into the research planner for her. And so it gives her name up at the top. It shows me some possible hints, some possible sources. And it also gives me a button to see her tree as she would see it. So I can click on that and see her fan chart. If she's given me some PIDs, I can search for them that way. So this is just a wonderful tool to have an experience that is what they would have had. Like, in other words, you get in there and you're seeing exactly what they're going to be seeing when they're logged in, and that gives you a better ability to help them. The last thing I wanted to mention is plans. So it's up here at the top menu. When you click plans, you get taken to this web form, basically. So you can give the plan a title. You can list the research goals here. This is a feature I absolutely love. You can add key ancestors. So if they give you a PID, you can plug it in here, and then it shows the relationship between them and the person that person whose PID you have entered. And then down here is just a form where you can type your plan. It's just a basic form that you're probably familiar with from word processing or from other web forms. So you can just do a numbered list, you can type text, just whatever, and it saves it automatically. Notice the note up here. Anything you type here, you don't even have to worry about clicking save. It's just automatically saved to the planner. So that's a basic overview of how you use helper resources. I would recommend, suggest getting in there and just playing with it. You can't go wrong by playing with it. You can't break anything. It's just great to explore the different features available. So once you've done all that, then you're ready to find a place of success. Something that's so important is to do it at the right level for the person that you're helping. So if they're a beginner, you're going to want to give them a very, very simple experience. Maybe you're finding somebody that's already in family tree and their temple work is ready, they're related, and all you're going to do is help them reserve the name and print the card. Maybe that's enough at that point. Maybe the person is eager to learn how to add photos, whatever it may be. But I've noticed that especially we as consultants sometimes are so excited that we overwhelm people. And we can just be incredibly simple, make an incredibly easy experience, and that's going to be so much better for that person because they're going to experience success, they're going to build confidence, and they're going to be ready to move on to harder things. Whereas if we overwhelm them, then they're going to feel like, oh, see, I knew I couldn't do this. This is overwhelming. I can't handle it. And we may end up discouraging them from family history instead of encouraging them to keep going. So, what does it look like to find a place of success? I want to share an experience and also some tools. Family Search has actually added a lot of amazing tools lately that help us find a place of success for people that we're helping. So, for those of you who've been through this class before, and I noticed a number of people on the participant list, so you'll probably remember that I've mentioned one of the things that I have enjoyed doing in the past and have had pretty good success with is I'll bring up the person's fan chart and then I'll prayerfully ask Heavenly Father to lead me to the family where we should be focusing. And this is very much a line upon line kind of thing. Like I've never had the spirit that I can recall give me a direct PID or anything. Go to LXTV 123. That has not happened. What I find is it's a combination of spiritual impressions and effort on my part and common sense. So, for instance, in this experience that I'm going to illustrate later, I actually felt drawn towards this couple. I felt like they were the right person for me to start with. So I did. But there are other useful tools that can help you other than just looking at the fan chart. It depends on what you're comfortable with. So one thing that the that Family Search has rolled out lately, lately meaning within maybe the past few months, I think this particular page became available last November, last December, something like that, is Temple Tools. And this is a page where they've gathered all the temple tools together. So Ordinances Ready is there, Unite a Family is there, the Descendancy fan chart is there. I had not planned to go into detail on that in this webinar. I just wanted to make you aware of it. But please go explore that. There's so many wonderful tools that can help you find a starting place for the people that you're working with. AI tree extending hints are another new tool. This one has been a labs experiment for quite a while, but then in December it was rolled out to everyone. So we're actually going to show that, like just show what it is in just a second. Then there's third-party tools like Pozilla and Virtual Pedigree. You always want to be prayerful and seek the guidance of the Spirit as you use these tools. And remember, the purpose of these tools is not to do massive name gathering. That I just have found whenever we focus on numbers more than people, we make mistakes, we do duplication, and we can discourage the people that we're helping. So seek the guidance of the Spirit in using these tools and use them to minister to the one rather than doing name harvesting. So the Family Ordinances Opportunities chart, this is actually, I'd have to say this is my favorite tool on that Temple Tools page. Basically, the way it works is that it's got this blue fan chart. For every couple, there is a number. So that's you may look at them and go, "Whoa, those numbers seem kind of random." Well, actually, they're not. They're always going to be between a couple, and the number indicates how many descendancy opportunities there are. So people in the tree that either they have been shared with the temple and you could reserve them, or they're ready for temple work and you could reserve them, or they have missing information and you could find the missing information and then reserve them. But then also, sometimes you look at those opportunities and you say, wait, that couple only has one child, but they both live to be 80. So maybe I should look for other kids. So the Family Ordinances Opportunities chart is a great way to find both people in the tree and places where people need to be added to the tree. So when you click on one of those numbers, you're going to get a pop-up that looks something like this, and it gives you all the explanations about what you're looking at or what might be missing. Like here we've got an orange temple and it says that this needs more information. And when that information is found, you might be able to reserve that person for temple work. So that's all we're going to say about that one for now. But if you'd like more information, please feel free to go to this webinar, which goes into detail about using this tool. I did want to comment about tree extending hints now that they're out of labs. So basically what happens is 5 hints are going to show up on your homepage. The homepage is just what you get when you go to familysearch.org with nothing else after it, like not familysearch.org/tree or slash search. I was trying to think what some of the other options are. So if it's just familysearch.org with nothing else after it, you go to your homepage, there's going to be 5 hints. These hints are for records that may mention people who are not yet in Family Tree. And every time you process one, then a new one is going to appear, so you're always going to have 5. When I first started using these, I had amazingly good success. Like they were accurate and valid. I added people, like they were hints for children. I would add the children, and that would lead me to more children. And I was just so delighted. I don't know if that was a fluke. I don't know if Family Search is casting a wider net now. I honestly don't know what has changed. But what I found lately is that almost all of these, so most of my family is in England, and of course, heavy extraction has been done there, and other countries that have been heavily extracted, and that means people have added records, added profiles from census records and christening records, marriage records, and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff for my English ancestors already in the tree. What I've found is lately, about 98% of the time, I click on this, and the person who looks like they need to be added are already in family tree. So at least for now, maybe they're going to tighten this up later on, but for now, be really cautious. The time that I've found when it's a problem. So here's an example. Possible spouse of, what's happening a lot of times on that is that this hint will lead to a marriage record. The marriage record will have the name of the spouse, and they may have an age for the spouse by which we can deduce a birth year, but they won't have any other vital information. And so that means that when you try to add this person with very limited or no information, no vital information, the duplicate searching in Family Tree doesn't work very well because there's no information to match with. And so I found, like, so often on those, really about 98% of the time, the people are already in the tree that you're trying to add. In fact, what's been funny is sometimes as I've opened up one of these people, I open them up and it goes to SourceLinker, and the person that they said I needed to add is already there, and SourceLinker recognizes it. And you may be saying, well, didn't what if somebody else just added it recently? No, they were actually older profiles that had been added a long time ago. So AI is wonderful. I am so glad that Family Search is using AI to help with family history, but it still needs to be verified quite a bit. So don't just take it at face value. When you look at these people, what I would recommend, actually, I did a webinar on this and I can't remember if I included it in this slide deck. If not, I'll have to find the link for you later. But what I would recommend is look at these for hints, but then if there's not any vital information on the hint, do a little of your own research and find the vital information and then add them to the tree that way rather than adding them without the vital information just from the hint. I hope that's making sense, you guys. It will help you avoid duplication, and the trouble with duplication is it leads to bad merges, it leads to extra effort. It's just better to avoid duplication if we can. Okay, enough about that. Two other great tools you can use are Virtual Pedigree and Pozilla. They're basically just different views of family trees. So they display information from family tree, but they have different features that can help you find people who need temple work or places where people need to be added. These links will take you to the respective sites. That's all we're going to say about these tools. So let's go back to an actual example of finding a starting place. I mentioned to you that for one particular experience, I felt drawn towards Eames, excuse me, and his wife Hannah. So I went to their person page, and this will just be a high level view of how I found a starting place for the person I was helping. So I went to their page, and it looked like they were pretty thoroughly researched. So again, it's a combination of inspiration and common sense. I just started looking at the kids, trying to see, okay, who looks like they might be missing some information. So what do we notice for, like, what would help us find where something is missing? Well, we can look for people who don't have parents. Parents are missing. Adults without spouses, people who, didn't die as children. They live to adulthood, but they don't have a spouse in family tree. Couples with few or no children. Large gaps between children can indicate that kids are missing, and people recently out of the 110-year privacy period. So they may have been waiting a while, just waiting for their date to come due, and now it's passed and they're ready for temple work, and you can reserve them or add them to the tree. So as I looked at James's family, I felt good about exploring his son Joseph, and so I looked at his kids and settled on George. Because as I looked at George, look at this. He and his wife Hannah only have two kids. And of course, back in that time period, that was a bit unusual. Most families were quite large. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to see if I can find a place of success for my person to add, the person I was helping to add more kids. So I looked at the parents, George, because I need this for context to recognize if I found the right couple with more kids. So George is born in 47 in Frisden, Hertfordshire. Hannah's 49 in Boxgrove, Sussex. And the kids are both born in Winchester, where I used to live. So that was kind of fun. Then, when I went to George's profile page and looked at the record hints, lo and behold, there was some low-hanging fruit. Not now, this won't always happen, but it happens a lot actually. So here was a record hint for George and his family in the 1891. Given that these kids were born in the mid 70s, they could show up on the 91 census. And indeed they did. So I sanity checked this hint to make sure, okay, there's George. He's the right age, born in the right place. Hannah, right name, right age, born in the right place. Kids are right, etc. Well, look what else was in that census. Five more kids. So this was a great place of success for the stake member that I was helping. So this is how I made the sample lesson plan. And I don't think lesson plans have to be hard. They can just be a quick numbered list. So I didn't want to make them go through all the generations that I had gone through. I just wanted to start them off with George. So I wrote down the PID and my plan was tell them to go to this PID. Then click view my relationship so they can see how they're related. I think that is so cool. Then we would together look over the vital information and the family relationships, and then notice that I would not say, hey, look what I found, five more kids, because that takes away the discovery experience from them. The reason I find something a place of success ahead of time is not to just announce what I found, but rather to find a good place to meet their goal and then walk them through making that discovery. That is so much more meaningful than me walking in and announcing it. So you just walk them through it. So I said to my friend, my stake member, look at that. There's a record hint. Should we check that out? And she said, yeah. So we looked at it and said, well, hey, does this match the known information? And she said, yeah, these parents are exactly right. And I said, well, what do you notice about the kids in the family? And she said, there's extra kids that we didn't know about. And she was so happy. And so then we added those missing kids to Family Tree. We found additional information for them. We made sure they lived past 8, the ones that didn't have an age of over 8 in the census, because of course, if they didn't live past 8, they only need sealing to parents. And my friend that I was helping, actually a youth, was very sharp and she was not intimidated by sources. And so we added sources as well. And that sometimes, if you're helping a person who is intimidated, you may want to either just add one source or break up the discovery experience and add sources later, something like that. But it's super important not to overwhelm people while still helping them do good and accurate work. So here are a few tips. We always want to build, I was trying to say tree and tips at the same time and it came out trips. We want to build the tree from the tree. That's the most reliable way to work. So start with someone who's known in the tree and then build from there. Before you help the person, you want to check for obvious problems such as bad merges, wrong relationships. If you find any, I almost never will go back to the person and suggest that they clean it up. That's just too discouraging for a beginner. So I will either clean it up myself or I will just say, you know what, that's not going to be a good starting place. I need to look for another one. Remember, the goal is to have them have a good experience. Always verify whether the person reached age 8 because it affects ordinances. And then finally, write down the plan. And so I shared with you an example of a very simple plan that I wrote down. Of course, we always want to be prayerful in our preparation. And we want to write down the steps to guide the person to find the place of success and also to keep in mind what would help them feel the spirit. And as we've said, this is kind of a summary of what we've already talked about. Avoid overload. We don't want to discourage people or make them think, I can't do this. That's the worst feeling for family history. Well, it's a bad feeling anytime, but we don't want people to leave a discovery experience feeling discouraged and that they can't do it. You can give them teasers, like for a next meeting, you can say, well, let's just add this one source for now, but how about if we meet next Wednesday and we can add the rest of the sources? And people are generally okay with that. They're like, they understand that it's good to break things up into chunks and they're eager to get going another time. And if appropriate, you can include homework for the person. Like if you feel like they are comfortable attaching sources, you could mention to them, say, we found these other sources in Family Search historical records. Do you feel like you could attach those this week before our next meeting? And if they say yes, then great. And if they say no, then I would say something like, okay, don't worry about it. Let's do it together when we meet next time. Okay, let's wrap up with some tips for teaching. Always, before, during, and after our teaching, we want to keep the best interests of the person at heart. If we let that drive everything that we do in family history, we're going to help. We're going to be true helpers that help them make progress and learn to love temple and family history work. Remember that we all learn line upon line. Avoid the temptation to overwhelm people or fire hose them. Break it up into little chunks that are just the right size for the learner. During the discovery experience, of course, we want to teach by the Spirit. As we've said, guide the person in making the discovery. Don't just march in and show them what you found, because again, that's not a great learning experience for them. So important ways to do this are to let them drive. So sometimes I'll go to somebody's house for a discovery experience and they'll want me to sit at the computer and I'll just gently say, no, I'd rather you did. And sometimes they're a little intimidated, but I do my best to make them feel comfortable and not intimidated. And the thing is, when they are actually the one clicking the buttons and doing everything, adding the profiles, they're going to remember it better and it's going to be a better experience. Another thing that's so important is not to rush. I've lost track of how many people have come to me after they've gone to, say, a family search center or they've met with a consultant and they say, man, they came in, they sat down, or I went to the center, we sat down, they were at the computer, they just raced through, click here, click there, add the source, reserve the person, blah, 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 print it out. And when I got done, says the person, I could never repeat what they did. I didn't even understand what they did. They were going so fast. It was very discouraging. So when you're helping somebody, don't rush. Take it at their pace. Let them ask questions. Give them all the time they need, and that's going to be a much better learning experience for them. Encourage them to ask questions. Let them know that there's no stupid questions. I can't tell you how many times someone has said to me, I know this is a dumb question. And I just say, no, no, there's no such thing as a dumb question. Please ask any question you want because that's how we learn. We learn by asking questions. Express confidence in the person and joy in doing family history. Joy is contagious. And end on time. If you were invited to someone's home and they said they had 30 minutes and you don't leave until 3 hours later, do you think they're going to want you to come back? Probably not. So whatever time you agree, I'll ask the people, I'll say, how much time do you have tonight? Most of the time they say an hour. That's the most common response. Once in a while they'll say 45 minutes or 30 minutes. But whatever they say, I stick to that religiously. I just say, well, our time's up. And if we haven't gotten done, yeah, I offer to set another time that we can meet together. Now, sometimes they're so excited. They're like, Never mind. I don't just we could I don't need to stop after 30 minutes. We can keep going. So I think sometimes they were like, I have to be sure I can get rid of this consultant person if I need to. So I'm just going to say 30 minutes. But then when they find out how fun it is and they find out that I'm not going to rush them or pressure them, then they're comfortable going a little bit longer. So the bottom line is I do what they would like me to do. If they need to stop right at 30 minutes, we stop. If they want to stay a little bit longer, we stay a little bit longer, but honestly, I rarely go past an hour because people start to get brain fatigue at that point. Bonus tips for teaching online. Since the pandemic, a lot of teaching is done online. And actually, I find that it allows me to reach more people because they can meet with me at 9 o'clock at night in their pajamas. They don't have to worry about cleaning their house for me to come over. So, or we could meet early in the morning. It just gives wonderful flexibility to be able to do family history by Zoom or Google Meet or Teams or whatever. So if you're going to teach online, get familiar with the software, especially being able to do screen sharing and chat. Practice ahead of time. That might seem unnecessary or even counterintuitive, but I found it makes a huge difference. When I practice, it shows me gaps in what I was going to do with this person. Like I'll say, oh, wait a second, they might not know what a census record is. I might need to explain that or whatever. So practicing ahead of time, you can either practice just out loud by yourself or practice on a trusted friend. When you're in the meeting, don't allow yourself to get distracted. Focus just as you would if you were in the same room together. I think people can feel the negative energy or the distractedness when somebody on a like you're on a remote call and you can just kind of tell by the person's tone of voice or whatever that they've checked out, that they're not really engaged in the conversation. So as helpers, we can't afford to be distracted. Especially if we're not doing video, listen for vocal cues like their tone of voice. Does there seem to be discouragement in their tone or are they hesitating? And also, whether or not you can see the person's face, I found that it is possible to connect with them emotionally and spiritually. We do that in prayer all the time. Very few of us have face to face conversations with Heavenly Father while we're praying, but we can feel that emotional and spiritual connection. And in my experience, we can do the same thing with our fellow brothers and sisters. Here is a chart that I love. I'm actually not going to take the time to go through this. It's a little bit long, but I would recommend. It's just this was given to me courtesy of Mike Sandberg from Family Search, and he actually talked to a lot of people about their experience being helped. And he got a list of things that people didn't like when being helped, and a list of things that really blessed their lives when they were being helped. So we want to always do these things on the right, the green things, and we want to avoid doing the red things when we're helping people. Finally, tips for improving. We will get better as helpers if we're intentional about improving. So every time you do a discovery experience, think about it. What went well? What would you do differently? And it may help to write in your journal about it. I find that I learn from writing about my experiences. If you're comfortable with it, ask the person for feedback. And you can study teaching in the Savior's way. This has wonderful teachings and suggestions and recommendations for how to teach most effectively. So to wrap up, I love this quote by our friend Mike Sandberg, who allowed us to have that other handout. Family history helpers like us seek to create heart-turning experiences for the people they help. These experiences help others love family history and ultimately become saviors on Mount Zion. So, everybody, thank you for coming. I wanted to make a recommendation that is not church related, actually, but this is one of the best books I've ever read on learning. It's called Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning. It's very readable. I got it from my library to start out with, and I loved it so much I bought it. I am not recommending that you buy it. I am recommending that you at least look at it. You may want to buy it, but if you can check it out from your library, so much the better. This taught me so many things that helped me become a better helper. So strongly recommend this book. So we're to the end of our webinar today, and I'd love to invite everybody to share their key takeaways in the chat. And in the meanwhile, while people are getting ready to do that, Elder Farnsworth, I completely forgot to stop for questions. Oh my goodness. I apologize, you guys. Do we have questions that we need to address?
You did great. Melanie had a question about how you find out if they had lived past 8. Gordon gave some great responses. If you want me to read them, look
Yeah,
for
would you?
any look for any event that would happen after 8, such as marriage, death, graduation, civic awards, etc. You can find these events in civic records, censuses, newspapers, etc. So would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think Gordon answered that perfectly. Yeah, it's just we don't have to prove, like, you don't have to have a death date. I guess I would add something, just sometimes it's very hard to find a death date, especially if the people died in a time period when records are not readily available, such as recently, where they're protected by privacy. So, as Gordon pointed out, you don't actually have to have a death date for the person. If you can just prove they lived past date, you're good as far as temple work. So Denise's takeaway is to keep learning, continual learning. Thank you, Denise. And anyone else who'd like to share something in the chat, a key takeaway from today. And in the meantime, I'm not sure if this has already been shared. Gordon often shares these links. Gordon, if you've already, he just did it. I love it. Gordon, you're the best. Thank you. So, Gordon just shared the link to the class handout. This is actually a handout for the whole series. So, the stuff that we talked about today is right here at the top. There's the link to the slide deck, link to the participant survey. We'd love to get your feedback on what you liked today and what you'd like us to do differently. And then there is a specific activity handout for this class. And then the other classes in this series are listed below. Oh, Jan's takeaway is practicing the discovery plan. Yeah, that Jan, it's so funny. When I first started, I'll tell you honestly, I felt embarrassed even when I was by myself. I'm like, this is so silly. I'm just sitting here talking to nobody as if, I tried to envision the person in my mind. But once I got past that little initial feeling of silliness, I just do it all the time. It's turned out to be so incredibly helpful. So, Jan, thank you. Jill says her key takeaway is don't rush. Oh, Anne says key takeaway was not to trust the AI tree extension hints. Very helpful. Yeah, they're at least don't. I hope I didn't give the wrong impression. They're a great starting place, but don't just add them blindly. Because especially if there's no vital information, like I said, most of the time recently, they've been duplicates. I've been able to find that person already in the tree. Oh, Lois says, key takeaway, don't create a new profile. Yeah, look and see if it's already there. If you don't find it, then obviously create the profile. But to Lois's point, don't just create it blindly. And Jill says, check everything. Oh, and yeah, that's that. Anne says, I remember you saying you loved them several months ago, so I loved getting this update. Yeah, I don't know if it was a fluke, but like I said, the first couple ones I did were slam dunk wonderful, and I ended up adding not only that name, but many other family members. But lately it's gotten so I was going to say so bad, but that sounds terrible. What's a better word? I guess I'll just say it. Lately, the hints have been for so many duplicates, I started a spreadsheet to track them. And I'm going to share that with Family Search in the hopes that it will help, refine the algorithms or whatever to make these hints not be for so many duplicates. So.